My next guest is Terri Eichholz. She has 29 years of classroom experience from the K through 12. She has an MA in teaching and specializes in gifted and talented education, maker education, edtech integration, and STEAM. She's worked for SAISD and NEISD in San Antonio, Texas, and currently consults, conducts professional development, and writes articles about education. She enjoys engaging all students, including adults, with hands on, student centered learning. Welcome to the podcast, Terri.
Thank you.
Well, tell me about a time when you were in the trenches and managed to crawl out.
All right. So you can imagine in 29 years of teaching that I probably was in the trenches many times. But the first one that comes to mind was about 8 years into my career. Maybe it even started a little earlier than that, probably 7 years. I was feeling very burned out. I had been at the same school, teaching the same grade level, basically teaching the same subject because we were departmentalized for most of those years. And I had taken on a lot of jobs at the school, and it just was starting to feel like I needed to quit teaching altogether. And so I was actively searching for jobs outside of the profession. I knew a couple of my colleagues were going to be leaving, and I felt like it was a good time for me to also look for something else. There was a teacher at my school who became a mentor to me early on, and she taught the gifted and talented education program. And she had seen me do some model teaching in some of the classrooms. She had worked with me with some of the students we both serviced. And she kept telling me that instead of quitting teaching, I should try to become a pull-out gifted and talented teacher. And I didn't feel like that was a good avenue for me to consider because that position is very highly competitive in the district that I was in. And B, I didn't feel like I was qualified. You had to take a 30-hour course, and at the time it was not offered for free. You had to pay for it. And of course, once you paid that $300, there was no guarantee you were going to get a position. So I kept putting off considering that, and instead just felt like I just needed to leave teaching altogether. And one day she called me and she said she knew of a position that was opening up and she thought I would be good for it. She was going to recommend me to the teacher who was leaving, who was going to help the principal look for someone to take her place. And I decided, okay, let's go for it and see, what happens. And I went to the interview as the very second to last day of school. I was dressed in jeans and a t-shirt because I found out at last minute that I was getting this interview, and it was the day of our 5th grade skating party. I went straight from the skating party to the interview. And I think part of my attitude was just, I'm going to do this, but nothing's going to happen. So I didn't really, I think, make myself nervous because I really wasn't feeling like anything would come of it. I got the job. And then I was given the summer to take the training that I needed. So luckily they were, okay with hiring me without the training at first. And it changed my teaching career completely. I went on to teach for 21 more years. So I was very close to leaving the classroom. And then suddenly, just by pivoting to a new school and a new position, I refound my love for teaching and engaging with students. And it just changed my life.
And I think that all took that mentor really to see that in you, and you saying, hey, I'm not qualified. I don't want to pay the $300. But her actually setting up, like suggesting to that principal and the principal seeing that in you, despite, not being dressed for the interview. But I
Right.
think that was just
Right.
where you were meant to be for those
Yes.
21 years.
Yes. That's how I felt. So, yeah, it was one of those situations that, there's these times in your life where you feel like you're supposed to go in one direction, but things keep prodding you in another one, and you just suddenly listen to the ones prodding you and you realize they were right all along. So, yeah.
Yeah, and that's kind of what happens sometimes in the educational field. Like,
Yes.
somebody else will see that in you that you don't see in yourself. So,
Right. Right. Yeah.
so talk to me about your work with consulting. So you work with a lot of companies regarding ed tech, local school districts as well, and you present mostly in Texas at computer and ed tech conferences. So tell me a little
Yes.
bit about the work that you're doing now to
Yes.
support schools.
Yeah, so that kind of grew very organically because I started sharing on my blog post different resources that I found. And I started a blog that eventually grew into a website. And then I went to a couple of technology conferences, learned more about Twitter, and got involved on Twitter. And I would tweet a lot. Tech companies would contact me and see if my students wanted to pilot a new app or to be involved in a Twitter chat about coding. Or so I started networking outside and just trying a lot of new things. And as I did those things and blogged about them, people started contacting me and asking me if I wanted to present about those. In the meantime, I was working Gifted and Talented, and I would present at our school district meetings to all of the teachers. And so it just kind of, I had organizations that I was involved in early in my career, and just felt like, okay, people again are seeing something, they think is worthy of me pursuing. So I started doing that as I was still teaching full time. And when I finally decided to retire, I really wasn't sure what I was going to do. And people found out I had retired and started inviting me to present more and do more professional development. So it just grew as people knew that I had a little bit more time on my hands. And I had built that reputation over all of those years of sharing resources on my blog and the social networking. So that really helped as well.
Mhm. Yeah, so that was basically, like you said, organically, just from sharing on your blog, really not
Yes.
knowing where that was going to lead. And, all
No.
these people then, getting involved in the Twitter chats, right? And then people
Right.
wanting you to
Right.
present. So that's really interesting how that, second phase now that you've retired from the classroom is now like, this is what you're involved
Yes.
in. And you hadn't really intended or seen it to be that that's how it's evolved. And you also talked to me about, so you have on your website, work with Terri, engagetheirminds.com. You have a lot of just professional development topics, and you also develop content. So talk to me a little bit about some of the things that maybe you've worked with districts on in terms of some of the content that they need most this particular school year, 22-23.
So one of the ones that's become really popular is my harnessing hexagons presentation. And
Okay.
this introduces teachers to hexagonal learning and thinking. And the thing I think that appeals to a lot of educators with this is that they can involve any student at any level in hexagonal thinking. It's got an entry point for kids who can't read or write, because you can use pictures, and then it can also really be extended for students who are very advanced. It encourages students to discuss, and it makes the students feel comfortable in speaking because they know that there's no one right answer. So it's very open-ended. and it can be used in lots of different subjects. So it's very effective when you use it with kids because you're getting them involved. You know how difficult it can be sometimes to get students involved in conversations in class, and it becomes very stilted and you have to give them question stems and prompts. But with hexagonal thinking, they just start talking and debating where they want to place the hexagons, what the connections are. And so that's been really probably my favorite one to do. Then I also do some visible thinking strategies from Harvard's Project Zero. And those also encourage a lot of discussion with students and higher order thinking. And one of the things that I was recognized for early on was Genius Hour. So I have a lot of Genius Hour resources on my website.
Okay. And this was a lot of just things that you were doing in your classroom as a GT teacher, and that you
Yes.
had blogged about, and then you've now made it possible for these, teachers across, like you said, levels and subject areas to use the hexagonal thinking, correct?
Right.
Okay.
So, and I also used it when I moved on to be a STEAM master teacher. So that was grades 4 through 12. And that's where I got a little bit more experience working with students at a lot of different ability levels in larger classes, because the gifted classes aren't often as large as a regular class. So I was able to kind of test things out and see how they work, in what many teachers would call a regular classroom. So mixed abilities. Yeah.
Yeah, because even a hexagonal thinking, that's something I really wasn't aware of. So I'm sure people who are interested in getting some training on that can reach out to you for
Yeah.
more information or visit your website.
Yeah.
So you talked about the writing of the blogs that you've been doing for quite some time. You're still writing blogs a lot.
Mhm.
Do you write blogs for a particular company,
Uh,
or is it mostly housed on your website? And what are some of the topics that you've done in the recent, maybe just a recent blog post that you've written?
So a lot of the blog posts that I've been doing recently have centered on using artificial intelligence with education. So my goal with a blog post is to give teachers a genuine, non-biased sharing of a resource. So if
Okay.
I find something, and this is not, I'm not hired by a company to do this, this is just my own will, that I find things that sometimes companies will send me something and say, hey, would you like to check this out for your blog? But most of the time I am writing things that I've just discovered on my own. And I know a lot of teachers don't have the time to be gleaning the internet for resources. So I try to share it with them and try to share with them the pros and the cons. So I'm not, all like, this is the best tool ever. I'm going to tell them some of the things that I see might be some possible obstacles in using it in the classroom.
Okay. And then they tend to um, really, do you have like teachers that will reach out to you then afterwards when they have used this tool that they might have read about, or maybe people that you've met via PD or conferences that'll then talk to you later about something that they've learned?
Yes. So I will have teachers that do that. They will often either email me. I actually have a folder that I keep of good things and good emails that I've received, just to, because sometimes it does feel like I'm speaking into a big void and nobody's paying any attention. But then I get an email like that, or a tweet, or something on social media, and I'll think, okay, this is helping somebody. I do a series towards the end of each year called Gifts for the Gifted. And it's just like different recommendations of products that I've seen over the year that I think people might want to give as a gift, as a learning, like fun learning gift to a student or buy for their classroom. And I get a lot of feedback on those. People will say, I got this and my students love it. And so every once in a while I get that feedback, which is nice.
Well, we've talked a lot about how you contribute through your blogging and through your PD and the content that you're sharing now. Out of everything we've talked about on the podcast, what's one thing you'd like listeners to remember?
I think that in my teaching career, there were times when I felt like I knew what was best and I wasn't ready to listen to what other people had to say. So I think that was definitely the lesson I learned from that out of the trenches story I told earlier. But I also think that we need to not be afraid of trying new things. I learned that a lot in my career, and showing your students that you're trying something new, I think helps them to develop a growth mindset as well. So a lot of times I would learn alongside with my students, and I honestly think that helped me become a better teacher, because not only was I modeling for my students the growth that I was experiencing, but also we have a tendency to help our students too much and not have high expectations of them. And when we're learning it alongside them, then we can't answer all the questions. And so they have to try to figure it out, and it helps them to become better problem solvers because I'm not enabling them as much. It's such a temptation to help them immediately because that's what we're there for, but we want them to be better problem solvers.
Oh, I totally get that today, that we see a lot of kids that, need that extra help and need the redirection, right? And it's just like, helping them find those resources, but then leaving it to them to solve the problem,
Yes.
without going through all the steps with them.
Right.
And that can be done at any level. Yeah. Where can
Yeah.
people connect with you and find you online?
All right, so I'm most active on my Twitter account, which is at Terri Eichholz, and it's TerriEichholz. And then my website is engagetheirminds.com. There's tons of resources for teachers, free downloads. I have Wakelet collections for all kinds every month of the year of resources with activities, and beginning of the year, end of the year, different topics. I think I can't believe I haven't broken Wakelet yet because I have so many collections. So yeah, lots of free things that teachers can find and download.
Great. I'll make sure to put that information in the show notes. Well, it's been a pleasure having you on the Out of the Trenches podcast today and learning about what you're doing to serve educators. Thank you so much.
Thanks.